Congolese people of the DRC are dying daily from a crisis that they did not bargain for. Children are losing their parents, and parents are losing their children, for a crisis that is powered mostly by the actions of both local and foreign agendas. But the mainstream media seems to be quite choosy about what they report. And even though the media silence is an issue, the bigger elephant in the room is, what is really going on in the DRC? Why is the crisis and killings not ending? What role is President Kagame of Rwanda playing in the funding and the operations of the M23? Who or what is the M23? What is the connection between the crisis in the DRC and the Rwandan genocide of 1994? What roles are foreign agents, foreign governments, and foreign mining corporations playing in the destabilization of the DRC? But before we go deeper into this issue, let's hear what President Paul Kagame of Rwanda has to say about the situation in the DRC and the alleged involvement of the Rwandan forces, or as some will call them, the M23.
Tshisekedi has been able to manipulate individual leaders, countries, now regions, and almost bringing a misunderstanding within and among regions, because he was playing SADC against East Africa. So why don't we therefore find a way of just talking about it and not allowing Tshisekedi to dictate the terms of what must happen, because he is even wrong. We know he's wrong.
President Tshisekedi said he was ready to meet you on two conditions: withdrawal of Rwandese troops from DRC, he said, and the pre-cantonment of the M23. Are you willing to accept those conditions?
You start by giving conditions. It's the wrong way to go about it. But I think sometimes people are playing to the gallery. They're posturing in the media, and if you talk about the preconditions, that would suggest that maybe we come up with the conditions as well. I won't meet President Tshisekedi until he reverses his statements about attacking Rwanda and carrying out regime change in Rwanda, as he has publicly talked about. I would also say, well, unless FDLR is removed from Congo, I'm not going to talk to President Tshisekedi, and so on and on and on and on. So this does not serve the purpose of bringing about peace.
Do you recognize the presence of Rwandan troops in Eastern Congo?
Why, in any case, would Rwanda be involved if it were? Meaning, I'm asking, those who are accusing Rwanda of being involved in DRC, or the forces of Rwanda being involved in DRC, I'm asking the same people, why do you think Rwanda would be involved in DRC? Would it be for fun? Is there fun that would put our forces on the ground in any situation, this time in Eastern DRC? And I'm saying this so that they don't escape the responsibility they have for why Rwandan forces would be in DRC if the forces were there. You see what I mean? I don't want them to achieve isolating or disaggregating the problem and simply sticking to the one of the forces of Rwanda, possibly in DRC, because that's what they would want to achieve. One part is internal, the other part is from outside. The internal one being the M23. These Congolese, by the way, sometimes people talk about M23 as these fighters, whatever name you call them, whatever you do against them. They have 100,000 people here as refugees in Rwanda. Some of them have been here for the last 23 years, others less, but including the 15,000 or so who have come recently, have been crossing the border almost on a daily basis. We have hundreds of families or dozens of families crossing every day, being targeted and uprooted from Eastern DRC. 15,000 have happened in this fighting, refugees coming here. Now, if you may call M23 terrorists or this, or you want to sanction them, or are you sanctioning 100,000 people that are here as refugees? That means you are not addressing the problem at all.
No, the M23 is on the gates of Goma. Are you calling on him, on this movement, to withdraw again?
When you don't look at the root causes, and you don't really look at the big picture of where you want to be, and that is about peace. You want peace in the end. How can you have peace by just addressing one element of hundreds of things that need to be considered? There are regional efforts. There's the Rwanda process, there's the Nairobi process, and fairly so, they are doing a good job.
Speaking of root causes for the crisis in the DRC, helping us make the connection is Peter Lawton, a South African researcher and author based in the UK. Listen to this.
Eastern Congo has been at a state of war for the last 25 plus years. And that war never ends. It's been going on for the duration of many young people's entire lives. And people become habituated to it. They think that there will always be war. And that war is quite often presented as just another African war. You know, here in the West, people have been sold that line for so long that wars happen in Africa, you know, like it's something that just happens. So if we have a look at that war and go to the very origin of it and look at the origin, and then look at a very important point in the history of Congo, which changed everything and which is causing the majority, which is one of the major contributors to why the war is as it is now. So we go to what people say. They say that the Rwandan genocide, 1994, that the war spilled over into Congo. The war didn't spill over into Congo. Rwanda invaded Congo. Rwanda and Uganda invaded Congo. There was no spilling over of the war. So, Rwanda 1994, how did it all start? Well, in many ways, you can say it didn't start with the downing of the plane, because that plane was shot down. The plane that carried the two presidents, the president of Burundi and the president of Rwanda, Habyarimana. But there were things happening before then. So many of the Tutsis had been expelled. They'd been expelled because of the social revolution that had taken place under Habyarimana's government. They ended up in many countries, but mostly they ended up in America, where Washington picked up on them and began sponsoring them as a minority group, persecuted minority group. This is where the whole tale, the story, the narrative began. It wasn't just Washington, it was the non-aligned movement, it was many other countries. But this whole story of the Tutsi being the minority persecuted people of the Great Lakes began. So what happened was they ended up, or Paul Kagame went to the School of the Americas to be taught in counterterrorism. He was at Fort Leavenworth. He was trained in intelligence. He was trained in how to extract stories from people, you know, the horrible tortures that Kagame and all his offshoots like M23 are so famous for, are these hideous acts of terrorism that are aimed at terrorizing populations, whole populations, like the people in the east of Congo. Terrorized, routinely terrorized. M23 like to submit people to the most unbelievable humiliation. This is sexual humiliation. So what happened? Paul Kagame and co. end up back in Uganda. Yoweri Museveni, who has always been, so many people won't want to hear it, but he has always been a Western creation. He was put in power, but we're not going to go into that now. And he does their bidding. He likes to stand up, like Kagame likes to stand up, and you know, the Pan-Africanists. I mean, come on, guys, you've got to wake up to this one. You know, why do you rate Paul Kagame so highly? Why do you rate Yoweri Museveni so highly when they criticize the West? And Kagame stands there and says the West is hypocritical, and he calls them out as being hypocrites. Do you know what Paul Kagame is? He is the biggest hypocrite of our times, man. You know, I've tried telling you guys, there's 2 big YouTube channels. Normally your stuff is fantastic, and yet you applaud Paul Kagame because he talks dirty against the West. I mean, you've got to get on the right side of history now, haven't you? You really have. What, are you going to applaud the psychotic murderer? How long are you going to do that for? And be completely deaf and blind to what's happening in Congo, what's going on with the Congolese? Because it looks great, you know, yeah, it looks great, doesn't it? Make a YouTube video about Kagame tearing the West to shreds. Do you know how he knows how hypocritical the West are? Do you know how he knows that for sure? Yeah. So they end up back in Uganda, which is where the Tutsis were trained. They were supported, financed, harbored by Museveni. And what they began doing is running terrorist operations within Rwandan borders. This is under Habyarimana. So they routinely terrorized communities, villages, which is what they're doing now in North Kivu and Ituri, and have been doing in South Kivu, burning villages to the ground, stealing the livestock, stealing anything, raping the women, subjecting the people to the most obscene humiliations. So you had a situation arise, which is critical. It is the most critical element of Rwanda 1994. You have vast regions of Rwanda that are now being terrorized by terrorists, by these Kagame's Tutsi RPF. And they're fleeing. And where are they going? They're going to Kigali. They're going to the capital to look for safety, to look for some kind of shelter. And they're arriving in their tens of thousands. And they end up in camps. And they end up living wherever they can live in and around Kigali, like they're doing now in Goma. And I want you to take note of that, because are we going to allow history to repeat itself? Will you allow something to happen in Goma and say, oh, you didn't know? Because I'm telling you now. There are millions of refugees now in North Kivu, all coming in towards Goma. The population of Goma has doubled. Are we going to let that happen again? Because do you know who the majority of the skulls and the skeletons and the dead bodies and the dead that Kagame likes to parade around to celebrate and have his death cult worship? The genocide never again. Those were IDPs. They were Tutsis and Hutus alike. They were human beings. They're internally displaced people. They were refugees fleeing Kagame's RPA. And this is happening. This could happen again in Goma. We know that, because until you understand history, it will continue to repeat itself. And the narrative is, until this day, that somehow Kagame was the liberator, the one who stopped the genocide, the Hutu genocide against the Tutsi. Kagame's the liberator. Do you know what an obscene lie this is? When all this comes to light in the future and we look back on it, can you see the monstrosity of this lie? So this isn't the only time, it's not the first time, so you have exactly the same stuff happening. 2 examples, you've got Syria and Assad. The government of Assad blamed on all the violence, on all the murders, on all the killings in Syria. Like he'd turn on his own people and just slaughter them to bits, because that's what they did with Habyarimana. They blamed it all on him and his Hutu government. All those killings blamed on him and his government. Same thing happened in Cote d'Ivoire, 2010. Just couple of multiple examples. And Laurent Gbagbo was blamed for everything that happened in Cote d'Ivoire after he won the election. So then you had the plane crash, the thing that's the precipitation of the war, the war of the genocide. And way back in 2011, Dr. Theogene Rudisingwa came out and said, I confirm it is Paul Kagame who sparked the Rwandan genocide. And you know, that man is an insider. He worked under Kagame for a long time until he came out. And he said Kagame had bragged about it, that the inner circles of Kagame's government know very well. I'm sure lots of people know very well. It was them who shot the plane down and killed the president of Rwanda and killed the president of Burundi and many, many other people.
African leaders have become managers of this orphanage, this charity house called Africa. And the people that run the biggest parts of the economy, they allow them trinkets like a nice house, nice car, some shares to make sure they pacify the masses, feed them, etc. I hadn't thought of what you were saying of Julius Malema being a valve where when the youth is angry, ANC sold out, we're angry, BEE, let's rush to our commander-in-chief, Julius, And then he says the things that kind of calm you down. And he points to a future which may never come until they find the next pacifying or pacification tool. And now you speak about Paul Kagame, who's currently worshipped as an example of a great African leader doing great things for Africa. Is that not the case?
That is absolutely the case. Kagame is actually one of Africa's biggest problems, because Congo is the biggest dissettlement of Africa that causes Africa never to unite. And Kagame is the reason why we've got the Congolese struggle.
The DRC, my basic understanding is that it's the wealthiest country
in Africa,
on the continent from a
in the
mineral
world
perspective.
In the world, yeah.
It's the wealthiest country in the world from a natural resources perspective.
100%.
And you're saying Paul Kagame has a part to play in that?
Yeah, people don't understand that we always hear about the Rwandan genocide. The Rwandan genocide was started by Paul Kagame. And he started the Rwandan genocide because he wanted to take power by force in a country that would have never elected him into power, because he came from the minority Tutsis who used to be supported by the colonizer and used to be the administrators on behalf of the colonizer. So for Paul Kagame to come back as a Tutsi to come and take power in Rwanda, he needed to do something. And what he did is he started the genocide. He started the genocide by bringing down a plane that had two presidents, Hutu presidents, the Burundian president and the Rwandan president. Paul Kagame and his RFP forces shot down the plane when it was landing back in Rwanda from actually an AU meeting. And when that plane came down, then it inflamed the Hutu people who knew that there were RFP fighters who were trying to take power by force. And so they began to fight against Tutsi people who they felt wanted to come and take over power. While they were doing that, Paul Kagame himself sent his forces to murder his own Tutsi people on a whole-scale level to make it look like a genocide, so that he could then have his forces come into Rwanda and take over power militarily under the guise of stopping a genocide against Tutsis.
These are all things that are factual.
Well documented.
Jeez.
It is actually something that the International Court of Justice wanted to persecute him for. And then the Americans covered up for him and the French covered up for him so that it wouldn't come out. But Paul Kagame came into power by murdering his own people. Then when he did that, he then took Laurent Kabila, who was now living in Rwanda, to go and take over power from Mobutu Sese Seko.
These are the leaders in the DRC.
This was in the DRC. And the arrangement that he had with Mobutu is, once you're in power, you need to bring some of my own people into your system. And the reason why he wanted to bring his own people into the system is that the Tutsis see themselves as a superior people to Bantus. And so they want to reinstitute something called the Mapororo Tutsi Empire that is going to rule over Central Africa and the Great Lakes. Because if you look where they came from in Uganda, Museveni is Tutsi. And he is the one who trained, together with people like Paul Kagame, in Tanzania, together with our liberation fighters. And when they came from those liberation camps, then Museveni went and took power from Obote, and then he put people like Kagame and the Hutus and the Tutsis into his army and intelligence. They then started murdering non-Tutsis who wanted power in Uganda, because they were majorities. And that's how Museveni becomes the president of Uganda as a Tutsi. And then he begins to assist Kagame, together with the Europeans, the Americans, to then create a force that is going to take power in Rwanda. And then they must take power in Rwanda, instill a Tutsi in Burundi, and instill a Tutsi in Congo. So when they then succeeded in getting what do you call him? Kabila into power, Kabila refused to put Tutsis into his government. And when he refused, then Kagame and Museveni then sent their armies and rebels into Congo with an intention to remove Kabila. Kabila then ran to SADC. And that time SADC had an organ, or the military institution was called the organ, which was being headed by Mugabe. And he said, listen, they want to overthrow me. And he gave them the reasons why they want to overthrow. Mugabe sent a fact-finding mission that it consisted of Zambians, Namibians, Angolans, South Africans, and everybody from SADC region. And he realized that this was actually a problem. So they went to Uganda, they went to Rwanda, they couldn't find Museveni when they went to Uganda, they couldn't find Kagame when they went to Rwanda, but they got information that there was going to be an overthrow of Kabila, and then the UN was going to be forced to actually come up with a policy that says Congo must be broken down into 5 countries.
Jeez.
The 5 countries would then be easier to loot for the West through Uganda, Rwanda, and their own people that they would have placed within the Congolese system. Then Zambia and Zimbabwe came up with a counter proposal, but they also sent their armies of the Namibians and the Angolans to go and stop Kagame from overthrowing Kabila. They were able to repel Kagame and Museveni's troops. And so Kabila was not overthrown because of that. For that reason, and us taking land in exactly the same time, the Western world came together and imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe. Because they said that this military that was used in Mozambique, that also participated in Angola, and now is coming to Congo, is becoming a hindrance to imperialism. So we need to break the power of the Zimbabwean military. Let's put them under sanctions. So that's what caused the sanctions. So when that happened, it was fortunate that enough war had been undertaken by the Zimbabweans, the Namibians, and the Angolans for there to be people within the Kagame and the rebel movements who agreed to the Sun City Accord. And that's why you had peace in Congo and the Sun City Accord that was then brokered by Thabo Mbeki. But remember, when Zimbabwe...
Broken by Thabo Mbeki?
Brokered,
okay.
Yeah. But remember, Thabo Mbeki was able to come and assist in negotiations. But Nelson Mandela had refused to go to Congo and assist Kabila on instruction of the Americans. The Americans said, you don't go there. But there is allegations that while all this fighting was happening, executive outcomes had people assisting Kagame and Museveni and the rebel movements to try and overthrow Kabila. So Kagame was being assisted. Museveni was being assisted by ex-SADF forces who are now calling themselves the mercenaries or the executive outcomes. And I think you've seen the video of Saima that talks about how black people were infected with HIV and how Saima went through SADC to kill certain people to protect apartheid. If you remember, there's a video on Saima and how they infected people in South Africa and Southern Africa with HIV. The same people are these that are called executive outcomes, are the same boers that then form these private security companies that you see here that are actually the biggest threat to South Africa at this particular moment. They are the same people that went to destabilize Congo and continue to destabilize Congo and continue to be advisors and continue to be supplying weapons and continue to be a destabilizing force in Congo. Which is why some of us are very skeptical. Why is the South African military in Congo not actually stopping the war in Congo, but peacekeeping and protecting companies like Glencoe and the Western companies that are looting Congo?
Dr. Theogen Rudisingwa said a beautiful thing. I'll just read it out. He said, truth cannot wait for tomorrow because the Rwandan nation is very sick and divided and cannot rebuild and heal on lies. All Rwandans urgently need truth today. Our individual and collective search for truth will set us free. When we are free, we can freely forgive each other and begin to live fully and heal at last. You see, this matter of the truth and what really happened, what really, really happened in April 1994 in Kigali. It's a carbuncle, it's a cancerous tumor. It has to end. It starts with you guys who call yourself Pan-Africanists. So did Hutus kill Tutsis? Of course they did. Some people did. There was some horrors, some horrific things that are completely unforgivable. But do you know why they did? And I don't know the numbers, but I'm pretty damn certain that most of those people that were murdered were IDPs, and they were murdered by Paul Kagame. But why did Hutus turn on their Tutsi neighbors? Needs talking about, doesn't it? Because for years, everyone in Rwanda knew that every Tutsi family was sending a son and was sending money to finance the Tutsi operation. Everyone knew it. The son would not be around, and the neighbors would say, "Oh, where's your boy?" And the family would say, "Well, he's gone away to study," or something like that. Everyone knew that they were in Uganda being trained. And every Tutsi family was obliged to give money. So the indoctrination is quite formidable. What the operation that Kagame's running. It's immaculate. It's fantastically professional indoctrination. All these celebrations. That's what they are. They're celebrations, like the one this year, to commemorate the 30 years, and all the foreign dignitaries that come and worship at the altar of the lie, and particularly Bill Clinton. I don't think Tony Blair was there this year, but he's a big friend. Him and his wife, big friends of the Kagames. But Bill Clinton was there this year. And anyone in Rwanda who even dares to question, not to deny, not to be a genocide denier, but to question what actually took place, why it took place, how it took place, and who conducted the majority of the killings. Anyone who does that is either dead or in prison. The only reason that Victoire Ingabire is still alive is because of the activists who kicked up. And all she did was question. There are countless assassinations of journalists. Countless. The Rwandans are absolutely voiceless. Absolutely voiceless. And what you have is the diaspora, who are predominantly Tutsi, who keep singing the lie. Probably because they're terrified. Because Rwanda can kill, they can assassinate wherever they like. And look what they did with Paul Rusesabagina's plane. They had the bloody thing diverted to land in Kigali so they could stick him in prison. So that constant indoctrination, that's still going on. When the schools are closed in Rwanda, the boarding schools, and the kids have gone home for holidays, they run camps there. And these camps teach about Tutsi supremacy. That's how they're indoctrinating the youth into thinking that the Tutsi are the only rightful rulers of the Great Lakes. So the Rwandan lobbyists, all internationally positioned to sprout the lies. And then you've got people like Jason Stearns. Let's talk about Jason Stearns, advisor to the American Security Council. How did he get that job? And what's he saying? And then all the Hollywood propaganda, the Hollywood films that give you a very emotive story, but bypass the truth. Because it's all part of the machine, isn't it? It's all part of the system. Hollywood, Washington, Westminster, Brussels, the Western Empire, the owners of the mines, same people as in South Africa, the same owners of the mines, who's benefiting from all these decades of war in Eastern Congo. Who? The owners of the mines. They're just using the Tutsi. They're just using them. Maybe tomorrow they come out with a little variation of the story and the Tutsi just get dropped just like that. And then they'll learn how utterly traitorous they are. So what happened is in 2003, there was a peace accord. This is after so much happened in Congo. Suddenly militias everywhere in the east and elsewhere. And you had Mobutu thrown, he was overthrown, old sick man, but he was overthrown, and Laurent Kabila came in. And this is when all you can call that episode in history was the invasion, the total invasion of Congo by Paul Kagame's Rwanda and Yoweri Museveni's Uganda. Invaded Congo. So we come to 2003, and the international community decided to do something about the astronomically high numbers of people dying in Congo. So it's around about 12 million is probably a low estimate. There's so much else one could go into about the killings of the Hutus, the killings of the Rwandans, whether they were Hutu or Tutsi. They were Rwandans fleeing into Congo after Paul Kagame took power in 1994. Do you know how they died? Do you know figures like 4,000 people in one camp alone? Slaughtered. Gone. So 12 million is probably fairly low figure. So we'll come to Sun City and this infamous peace agreement. Sun City is a place, it's a casino in South Africa. And they held a conference there. And what happened at that conference must go down in history as the complete takeover of Congo, the complete takeover of the Democratic Republic of Congo by the powers that put Kagame in place and support Kagame to this day. I want to ask you how it could be that that conference was hosted by South Africa under Thabo Mbeki, and how it could be that of any country in the world, that South Africa could have had its role. Because what that agreement, that peace agreement said was that they believed the narrative. They believed that the Hutu of Rwanda had turned on the Tutsi of Rwanda and slaughtered them. Shame on you. Shame on us. And how South Africa could have led that role of all the countries in the world, all the humiliation of apartheid for all those decades. And I could never understand why it wasn't that every white in South Africa wasn't wiped off the face of the earth. But you didn't do it. And why didn't you do it? And I can tell you, and I want to tell you why you didn't do it. Why you didn't do a white genocide in South Africa after all that humiliation. Because you're African. So why did we think that every Hutu was a genocidaire? That our African brothers were all genocidaires? It's a shame on all of us.
Our African leaders like to make big statements about Africa's unity in their AU summits, but we can't stand ourselves at our local borders. The foreign agents who come to Africa to cause chaos and topple governments through coups and assassinations don't fall from the sky. They come through the very same airports and seaports where we like to embarrass our very own African brothers and sisters with stupid and condescending questions about why they are visiting our individual countries. We give these foreign agents preferential treatments at our borders and welcome them as tourists and investors, but treat fellow Africans like third-class citizens of the world. We are our own problems. How long shall we keep this foolishness going? For while the African leaders are thumping their chests like overfed bullies, and they and their families are protected by tons of security guards, their people are being slaughtered like chickens in their own homes. These things should not continue. We must find a way out of this mess that has been created in Africa. It is our collective duty to do so. I will now leave you with the words of two of our beautiful Pan-Africanists, Robert Sobukwe and Thomas Sankara.